Welcome back. Before we get into today's content, I wanted to show you this elk. And I got a little backstory with it. This elk is what really started my rifle business. And here's kind of what happened. The first year that we went hunting out west, had some friends, still have some friends out there, that we went on a bear hunt. And we realized really quickly that if we can shoot across these canyons, we can kill bears. Because what was happening was these bears were coming out just before dark, and we were sitting on this side of the mountain, glassing into the open areas on that side of the mountain. And most of the times it was 600, 700, 800 plus across those canyons. And my brother and I hunting, we're carrying, just your typical 30-06 Remington 700 kind of stuff, comfortable shooting maybe to 300, 350 yards. And so we realized really quickly that we either have to figure out how to get over there and find those bears in those open areas, get on the same plane as them, or figure out how to shoot across these canyons. So we did what I guess anybody would do that didn't have success for a few days. We walked into a local gun shop and said, "Hey, you guys got anything here we can shoot pretty far with?" And the guy points over at a used gun sitting on the counter and says, "There's a 338 Lapua. That'll shoot groups like that at 500 yards. I think he was stretching a little bit, but we ended up walking out with that rifle, and we went and shot a couple bears at, I don't remember, 500, 550, 600 yards. And it made the difference for us to be able to reach out a little bit further, but we were just shooting the ammo that we got with the rifle, not really factory or not really hand loads. So that kind of got me started in hand loads, messing around with that rifle. I actually went to another guy that did hand loads for me before I ever started reloading. He worked up a load for him. I paid him to do it, and I still have that rifle today. But fast forward about a year, or I think it was the following year, we went back to Montana on an elk hunt. And I found this elk at 1,070 yards, and with that 338, simple as dial it up, and I shot him. Well, after that, some friends, some family, some business associates started coming to me going, "Hey, I'm going out west. Can you help me? And can you help me? Basically, I like to say it this way. Here's a pile of junk. Can you make it shoot?" They'd bring like a Savage to me with a Vortex scope or you get it. And most of the time I was able to make them shoot and get a lot better performance than they were getting with factory ammo. And one day I thought, well, why am I doing all this work and I ain't got nothing to sell except my knowledge of putting together loads for these people? And so that's what started my rifle business. And now I am able to get the scopes and the guns and all the stuff it takes to make it work. But I thought that's a fun little story. Most of you probably don't know, but that elk is really what started the rifle business. All right, let's get into the topic of the day. There's the rifle I was talking about earlier. This is a Savage 110 338 Lapua. This thing is a beast. It is heavy. Probably weighs north of 11 pounds, bear rifle. You see it doesn't have a scope on it. It's kind of retired, but it's done some long shots. It kind of got me started in this long range game. Killed 2 bull elk at long range. One was at 1070, was this bull back here I was talking about. And my younger brother killed a bull with this thing at, I believe, 1,140 yards. But it's retired. Maybe someday I'll throw a scope on there. It still shoots good, but I just don't want to carry that much weight in the mountains. Maybe someday I'll throw a scope back on it and just go try to shoot something with it again, just for old time's sake. We'll see. Anyway, all right. So the reason you're here is some data. I have some data for you. So the rounds we talked about earlier, I didn't get into specific drop and drift, and so we're going to talk about some of those same calibers. I did add a couple calibers and a couple cartridges to it. And so we're just going to go over some of the numbers. I plugged in the data at 1,200 feet of elevation, which is kind of just all around average eastern elevation. At home, I live in Pennsylvania. This is kind of our average. Barometric pressure is set at 28.5. Just know as you get into the mountains, and you start going up, these numbers are just going to get more forgiving, and especially if you go into like Colorado, 10,000 foot elevation, they get quite a bit better. But the numbers for today are plugged in at 1,200 feet elevation. All right, so I want you to know I'm not covering every caliber that's out here. These are just some of the most popular ones, the ones that would be on my list if I'm looking for a new rifle, and some of the data and my opinion on some of these calibers, what they're good for, what, you know, if you're in the market for a new rifle, you know, kind of which one might fit your need. All right, so the first one that I have is a 300 Remington Ultra Mag, and it's not that popular. The reason I threw it on this list is because I feel like it's kind of the biggest rifle, that the largest caliber that I would like to just still throw into the hunting class. You know, this is for the guy who really wants to get north of 1,000 yards, wants to hit with plenty of energy and do it efficiently. So I have this one plugged in with a 245 grain Berger bullet. It's a hammer of a bullet. The BC of this bullet is higher than the 300 grain bullet out of the 338 Lapua. The BC of this bullet is 820 something, I believe. And so the velocity that I'm getting out of that setup with a 300 rum is also higher than like a 338 Lapua, and therefore it's going to drop less, it's going to drift less, and it has an incredible amount of energy well past 1,000 yards. This would be for the guy who really wants the biggest, baddest thing that he can get his hands on, but not have to go into a 10, 15 pound rifle. That's my 10 cents. All right, at 1,000 yards, we have 21.4 MOA of drop. We have 224 inches of drop. I'm gonna give you the inches as well, just because for guys who are getting into long range, might not be really familiar with MOA yet, the inches kind of computes pretty easily. We have, in a full 10 mile an hour crosswind, we have a drift of 3.8 MOA, which computes to 39.9 inches. And the energy is at 2052 foot-pounds. All right, that's the 300 Remington Ultra Mag. The 300 PRC is probably the most common 30 caliber at the moment. It's a phenomenal round. I would say this round is for, you know, guys who are wanting to shoot 1,000 yards and in. I feel like is really where this round shines. I mean, can you go north of $1,000? Yeah, but I feel like it's that 1,000 yards and in round. I have this thing shooting a 212 grain ELDX. Now, you could also shoot like a 215 Berger. The data would be very similar. I love that weight of bullet in the 300 PRC. I feel like you kind of get a great mix of velocity and BC. The BC of this bullet is really nice and high. It's 0.66, I believe. So a great BC, and I personally in the 300 PRC don't really see a need of going up in bullet weight. I feel like you start, especially if you start going north of 220, you start losing enough velocity that you don't really gain anything even though you have that extra BC. All right, so at 1,000 yards, we have 23.2 MOA of drop, which is 243 inches. And we have wind drift of 5.1 MOA, which is 53 inches. And we have an energy of 1,434 foot-pounds. Now, I just want to note, I'm not going to compare every one of these side by side, but I just want to show you the difference on the rum, again, just side by side, especially on energy. Our wind drift is quite a bit better. Our drop is some better. But the energy of that 245 grain out of that rum versus the 212 out of the PRC, we're talking 1434 out of the PRC and 2052 out of the rum. So there's a pretty significant amount of difference. And that's why I'm saying if you really want to go beyond 1,000 yards, that rum's going to really shine on energy over the PRC. I feel like with that that energy, we're kind of starting to get at the top end somewhere around 1,000 yards. You know, and for hunting applications, there's very few people that need to shoot beyond that 1,000 yards. And in most cases, it's really not that ethical. But the 300 rum definitely is more forgiving. All right, 28 Nosler. This round, I feel like it's a phenomenal round. I would have to say, especially for all around Western big game hunting, it's my favorite round because you have a little bit lower recoiling round, I feel like, than like the 300 PRC. It's shooting a little bit lighter bullet, but you're getting a little more velocity out of it. But the BC of this bullet that I have here is a 195 grain bullet. The BC of this bullet is higher than the 212 ELDX. Therefore, we're getting less drop and we're getting less drift. And because the BC is higher, it's going to keep its energy better and we're going to hit even harder. So this round, I would say, is a round that is capable of going north of 1,000, you know, on elk, those kind of animals, 1,100 yards. I see no problem taking something as big as an elk with it. Our longest kill shot to date is still with the 28 Nosler, shooting a 195 burger at 1,260 yards. And that elk was on his feet for maybe 8 to 10 seconds after that bullet went through him. So he went down really quickly. So it was a good, clean kill. All right, so at 1,000 yards, we're at 20.6 MOA of drop, is 215 inches. And in a full 10-mile-an-hour wind, we are at 4.1 MOA of drift, which equates to 43.4 inches. All right, so let's compare this one again with the PRC. So the PRC, we're at 1434 on foot-pounds of energy, and the 28 Nosler, we're at 1611. Even though our bullet is, what do we got, 17 grains less. It is hitting harder because it is a higher BC and it holds its energy just a little bit better. So we're flying flatter, we're drifting less than the 300 PRC. But you know, there's guys out there that really want that 30 caliber, and if you really want that 30 caliber, and you know, maybe you're going to Alaska eventually for some bears or moose or something like that, that 30 caliber might shine a little bit better. It is, you know, there's definitely more lead there. So there's reasons to jump to the 30 caliber, but you know, it's pretty interesting when you start plugging in numbers and really starting to look at how these stack up side by side. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is the 7 PRC. This is by far the most requested round of 2024. Anytime something new comes out, everybody and their brother talks about them, and this is kind of that round this year. All right, the 7 PRC, just a great all-around rifle. You know, I talked about in the earlier video. It's really not overkill for the Eastern hunter to tote it around in the mountains or in a tree stand, but then also a great rifle to go out west with. That's kind of the way I look at this rifle. I would say it's, you know, you can go 1,000 yards with it, but I would like to say it's more like an 800 yard in. It's probably a little more ethical. You'll see the energy of this is just not where these other two were that we talked about. I will say this. Now, there's probably going to be people that are going to be commenting and saying, oh, I can get more velocity. I can get, you know, better drop and drift, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. All these numbers that I'm talking are plugged in with average numbers, with numbers that are, you know, these are the average numbers that I'm seeing. These are numbers that you're not going to be out in the field and have a problem with pressure and something jamming up. Your rifle should work flawlessly day in and day out in all conditions. So we're not shooting, you know, really hopped up hot loads. This is just good, solid, average numbers. That's going to be, you know, easy on your rifle, easy on your brass, but you got, you know, just a good load that I would call would be a medium to the top end of medium load and not getting hot. All right, so the 7 PRC is shooting a 175 ELDX. You could throw a 180 burger in there or something like that, and you're going to get similar numbers. I feel like that 175, 180 weight bullet is kind of the sweet spot for this caliber. jumping up to like a 195, you start losing enough velocity, you start getting more drop. Your drift stays about the same, but you start getting more drop. You don't really gain that much energy. So I just love that little 175 ELDX bullet. We've killed some stuff with it that has just proven it over and over. All right, so at 1,000 yards, you are at 24.1 MOA. You are 252 inches of drop. You have 5.2 MOA of wind drift, which is 55 inches. And you have your energy is at 1160. All right, so here's a caliber that I did not talk about earlier, but I think it's worth noting. It kind of sits in between. There's a lot of people that are kind of torn between the 6.5 PRC and the 7 PRC, and so I threw in the 6.8 Western, and it sits right in between those. It is not as popular. I'm getting almost no demand for it, which gives me very little experience with this round. I have messed with it some. The little I've messed with it, I will say it has been a little bit more finicky to get really good performance out of it than I thought maybe that it would be, or to get really forgiving loads. I'm not sure why. That's just something that I have seen with the small amount of experience that I have with it. However, I have this one shooting 170 grain burger bullet. And I would say this is kind of the round that, you know, is for the guy that's torn between the 6.5 PRC and the 7 PRC, just can't make up your mind. Maybe give it a try. That's what I would say. All right, it has 23.1 MOA of drop, 242 inches of drop, and it has 5.1 MOA of drift, which is 53 inches, and it has 1,148 foot-pounds of energy. So it's not far behind, or there's not much difference between this round and the 7 PRC in actual numbers at 1,000 yards. They're actually very similar. All right, so now we're jumping down to the 6.5 PRC. This is a great round. Like I said earlier, I feel you can kill elk with this round, no doubt. There's guys doing it. I just wouldn't set this rifle up as a primary elk rifle. But I wouldn't be afraid to drop one in my pack and carry it deep into the backcountry because it's lightweight. And, you know, you put that little 147 ELDM bullet through the lungs and you got an elk. But it's a great round, I would say, for deer, for antelope, and then maybe an occasional bigger game like an elk or something. That's where I throw this round in. All right, so we're at 23.5 MOA of drop, which is 245 inches, and that is 4.9 MOA of drift, which is 51 inches, and we have an energy of 1,007 foot-pounds. All right, so now we go down to the baby round that I have on here, and that's a 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, I will say this about the 6.5 Creedmoor. There is probably not a single round that has got more hate than the 6.5 Creedmoor. I've heard story after story after story of people, and, you know, coming from people that are like guides and stuff like that, that tell me, oh, I had a client, I had this guy, I had that guy come in, and he got a 6.5 Creedmoor and made the perfect shot and never found him, or blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying that can't happen, make perfect shots and you never find them, but I kind of find that hard to believe. So I think the reason that there's so much hate with the 6.5 Creedmoor is simply because there is so many people shooting it. It is a really popular round, and that's why I threw it on here. That 6.5 PRC kind of took away a lot of the hype of the Creedmoor, but you still see it, especially in the East, guys deer hunting with it, or guys who are hunting out of, you know, tree stands, tree houses, and those kind of things, hunting fields where they can shoot a little bit longer, especially on deer. I think it's still got a place in the field. But we have it shooting 140 grain burger or a 143 LDX. The data is almost identical. But at 1,000 yards, we have 28 MOA of drift or drop. We have 293 inches of drop. We have 6.2 MOA of drift, which is 64 inches. And we have an energy of 736 foot-pounds. All right, so there's some numbers for you. I hope this helps you make a decision on what caliber and cartridge is right for your next long-range hunting rifle.